What's going on, Packers Nation? Welcome back to another video of Packers Latest. I am your host, Taylor Bretl, keeping you up to date on the latest news you need to know on the green and gold Green Bay Packers. A happy Wednesday to all of you out there. Still coming off that unfortunate loss against the Denver Broncos, but there is lots to look forward to in another rivalry game against the Chicago Bears. We go Bears, we go Broncos, we go back to the Bears. Lots of Chicago action over these past couple of weeks. If you're new to the channel, feel free to subscribe or leave a like. If you want to turn on the notification bell so you know when these videos go live, feel free to do that as well. Want to keep growing a community here among fans of the green and gold Green Bay Packers. We're going to start off this episode talking about the running back room in Green Bay. It's been kind of messy this season, especially as of late. Some guys injured, some guys thinking they're going to be okay, then they realize they're injured. Some guys getting sick. There's a lot going on with this running back room. So let's break it down name by name, starting off with the guy that leads this running back room in Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs coming off one of his best games of the season despite a loss to the Denver Broncos. He had a receiving touchdown, which was his first receiving touchdown of the season. He also had a rushing touchdown that was a 40-yard run, a very nice run for Jacobs near the left side of the field. He had a strong game with those two total touchdowns, again, despite the 34-26 loss. Jacobs has been dealing with an injury on his knee, some kind of inflammation on that knee, kind of got to monitor it. He wants to play through it. Matt LaFleur and the medical staff want him to play it safe. Lots of back and forth there, kind of some happy bickering, you can call it, where the Packers are saying, hey, please be safe, and Jacobs is saying, no, I'm going to play no matter what you tell me. You like to see that from a guy, but you want to make sure that he's healthy. These quotes, he had media availability yesterday. These quotes come, the first one from Matt Schneidman on X, on a quote where Josh Jacobs said, every time I have had a pretty good game. That's talking about games where he possibly wouldn't play, where they were telling him he should take a rest and he wanted to play. That is his response to it. The official post by Matt Schneidman before that says, Josh Jacobs re-injured his knee early in Denver, but stayed in and made some of his best plays of the year. Said he and Matt LaFleur have kind of clashed about playing through injury several times since he arrived in Green Bay. Another post, this one coming from Ryan Wood on X, saying, Josh Jacobs walking with a significant limp in the locker room and wearing a stimulation bracelet around his injured knee makes it clear he intends to play in Chicago. Another quote from this media availability with Jacobs where he said, for me, it's harder to watch games than it is to play hurt. You love that kind of mentality from a player, especially from one of your stars on the offense. One of the best running backs in the NFL in Josh Jacobs. You really like to see that, but you want to make sure that he's healthy. You don't want to play through an injury and hurt yourself too bad to where you can't play in the playoffs. But again, you love to have that for such a leader in a guy like Josh Jacobs. You go down the list of this running back room, we're going to go to Emmanuel Wilson. He saw time in that game against Denver. Just 2 carries, I believe, but he was battling an illness. There is no update on that illness, which is a good thing, meaning it hasn't gotten worse. And the fact that he played through it means that he should be all clear and good to go against Chicago. But again, with the injury report, we will monitor things as we get closer to Saturday. We go to Chris Brooks. He should be good to go, mainly in there for pass blocking, but nice to see Brooks has played such a pivotal role in this running back room. And then we go to the fourth guy in the running back room who we have waited to see take time on an NFL field in the regular season outside of one game against the Colts a year ago in Marshawn Lloyd. Marshawn Lloyd, the draft pick out of USC, has not been able to stay off the injury bug. He was dealing with a calf injury, now picked up a hamstring injury, and now it could be leading towards his season being no more. This is per Adam Schefter on X saying, former Packers third-round pick Marshawn Lloyd, whom the team was hoping to have returned this season, suffered another hamstring injury in recent days. His return is now at best delayed, if not derailed. Marshawn Lloyd, again, one of the best running backs in that draft, obviously was a kind of a later round pick, not the first one taken off the board, but man, if you watch highlights of him at USC, where funny enough, he was teammates with Caleb Williams, he was one heck of a runner. It was a really exciting piece that Green Bay could have added. When they drafted him, it was looking like it was going to be him and Aaron Jones. Then Aaron Jones no longer is with the Packers, looking like Lloyd and Jacobs could be a duo, but Lloyd has not been able to stay healthy, keeps hurting his hamstring, and now it's looking like he could be out for the season. After a quote with him in the locker room about 2 weeks ago, kind of with a positive vibe, a positive look on how he could be back for Green Bay. Just really unfortunate stuff to see. Nothing that you ever want to see with any player in any sport. Really unfortunate. I keep saying that, but that's really the word that describes this whole situation. He's so young that it's odd that you get injured like this consistently. Sometimes this leads guys to just medically retiring. Hoping that's not the case with Marshawn Lloyd, but definitely a lot of concerns with how injured he keeps getting in the leg area, whether it's ACL, a calf, his hamstring, no matter what it is, it seems to keep on tallying up. Really unfortunate to see. But we are going to flip it over to the defensive side of the ball and talk about a guy that we really haven't seen much of in Rashan Gary. Where is he? Rashan Gary off to such a strong start this season. You look at him through the first 7 weeks of the season, he had these numbers: 7.5 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, 4.5 stuffs, 1 forced fumble, and 15 solo tackles. Some pretty good numbers from the defensive end for the Green Bay Packers, one of the higher paid defensive ends in not just the NFC, not just the NFC North, but in the NFL. But Rashan Gary, these last 7 games, has been basically non-existent, which is unfortunate to say, but that is kind of the way you got to put it. Over his last 7 weeks, 0 sacks, 0 tackles for loss, just 1.5 stuffs, no forced fumbles, and only 10 solo tackles. Rashan Gary getting heavily shut down, and this is while he's alongside Micah Parsons, who's the key guy that this offensive line is worried about, where they double or sometimes triple team him, or if they're not, they're holding him on every single play. We all know it's happening. We've seen the clips. But nonetheless, Rashan Gary, it feels like that would give him more opportunities if the defense is shying away from him and looking more at Parsons. Now that Parsons is out, Gary has to find his groove because he's now going to be the main target, and he's been struggling already not as the main target. This is per Kenan Galls on X, saying Rashan Gary has 0 sacks and 0 tackles for losses last 7 games, which is the longest streak since his rookie season, which was 9 games when he was a rotational backup behind the Smith brothers, which was Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith. And he says that's with the defense focusing attention to Micah Parsons. Now he's the primary threat, kind of as I mentioned. This is why it's really big for Rashan Gary to figure it out. Got to get things locked and loaded, especially with Chicago coming up. He's got to find his groove once more, and he cannot get shut down like this, or else this Packers defense is going to struggle. And unfortunately, this is what will lead to a loss. Quarterbacks getting comfortable, not much pressure on them. Again, when the Packers faced Chicago just a week ago, they got just 1 sack in that game. And again, Caleb Williams, not the greatest game. He did have some nice flashes, but overall, that game winning interception for the Packers is not how you want to end it if you're Caleb Williams. But he was getting, he was able to move around in the pocket. Maybe not getting the time because he was kind of running like crazy, but only 1 sack in that game for Green Bay. So Rashan Gary has got to change things for himself and has got to change things for the defensive line. But looking at the defensive line a little bit more, who can step up following Parsons' injury? Rashan Gary, obviously the number 1 guy that needs to step up, but who else can fill in those shoes? Because there's going to be 2 defensive ends playing in this game, not just 1 in Rashan Gary. We turn it over to Kingsley Enagbare, who is listed as the other starting defensive end following Parsons' injury. He, against Chicago, had 4 solo tackles and a sack, which was one of his better games of the season. Again, just 1 sack in that game against Chicago, and it was Enagbare. He has been a nice addition for the Packers, a later round draft pick. I believe he got drafted in the 5th round, so nice to see what he has been able to do in his service time with Green Bay. You go behind Enagbare, listed behind him on the depth chart, Lucas Van Ness. Talk about a guy that we really hope to see a lot from. You've seen those flashes, another guy battling with some injuries. And now, with Parsons and with Gary, you're kind of just getting overshadowed in the defensive end room as a whole. But he is a first-round draft pick, the 13th overall pick out of Iowa, so he's got the tools. He has played in just 7 games this season. He's been battling that foot injury, and he's only played in 3 games since October 12th. So, more of his games on the earlier part of the season. He's played in just 3 games once more since October 12th. He's played a couple snaps against Denver, especially when Micah Parsons went out. He ended up finishing with 2 tackles in that game, but Van Ness really needs, and that's another guy that needs to find his groove. And he has kind of, he's been in there and then he's not in the game for most of it. He's not really getting consistent playing time, but he's also battling injury. So he's kind of not getting consistent playing time on his own time and kind of with how that lineup is as a whole. But now, unfortunately, with the Parsons injury, that should mean more time for Van Ness. So if he was ever to jump on an opportunity, it is now. But outside of Van Ness, outside of Enigbari, there are more guys that kind of await their time to shine, especially some key names on guys that are younger, 2 rookies that I turn to on this Packers team. Starting off with defensive end Barron Sorrell, the 4th-round draft pick out of Texas this season. He stands at 6'3", 256 pounds. He has appeared in 12 games this season for the Packers, but he did not appear in the game against Denver. But Sorrell could be a solid depth piece. Again, if he's the 3rd option with Micah Parsons in there, now he kind of moves up to that primary backup when you have guys like Gary and Enigbari and then Van Ness kind of being that 3rd option. He is right behind these guys. So again, with the unfortunate amount of injuries we've seen this Packers defensive line get, everyone has to be ready to go. And for health reasons as well, these guys are not going to be playing 100% of the snaps. I mean, Micah Parsons didn't even do that for his own health. You get gassed pretty easily. Maybe you're missing a down or 2 per drive. You got to turn to your depth, and there's a lot of young guys on this roster that can prove that they deserve to wear that green and gold uniform. Another rookie that I turn to is defensive end Colin Oliver, the 5th-round draft pick for the Packers this season. He is yet to appear in a game this season, so a little different than Sorrell, who's appeared in 12. Oliver has yet to appear in a game this season. He's been battling a hamstring injury, but there's rumors that maybe he could be good to go against Chicago. They got to see where that kind of leads as we get later in the week, as we get closer to Saturday, see what the injury report entails. But again, he's possibly going to be cleared to go against Chicago on Saturday. He stands at 6'2" and 240 pounds. So the Packers, they got a lot of options, on the defensive side. No one's going to match to the level of Micah Parsons, unfortunately, but you like to see that you have depth pieces that can fill that role. Because the worst thing that you could have is Parsons is down and you have no depth and you're just saying it's kind of over on the defensive line. There's some exciting stuff here. I mean, Colin Oliver hasn't played a snap for the Packers. Who knows? What if he's a mini Micah Parsons? That's what some people are hoping for. That's obviously a huge stretch knowing how dominant Micah Parsons is, but still exciting that we could possibly see some action from some rookies, from some guys that are like 1st-rounders like Lucas Van Ness, who we know has that 1st-round talent. It's going to be interesting to see how that defensive line is guided, especially against Chicago being your first game, and then 2 more after that against Baltimore and against Minnesota before you hopefully have playoff play. Packers are yet to clinch, but they are very close, and a win against Chicago would help so much. So let's root for that. But that's all I got for this episode of Packers Latest. I appreciate you guys tuning in as always, and go Pack Go.